Everyone, hello. My name is Robert. I'm the founder of the Genius Smart Financial Contract. And I'm here with Digital Diogenes. Hey, Digital.
Hey,
Digital is from the Genius community. You can go to the Genius community now by, how do you do that? You go to Telegram, t.me/GENI crypto. And here we're doing this live stream over over the phone. Had a little bit of technical difficulties. So, hey, thank you everybody for watching. If you have questions, put them down in the message area. And yeah, I look forward to us having a good time here. Digital, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Okay.
How are you tonight? How are you
I've had a super busy day. Super busy day.
doing? Well, so the vision for this.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah, yeah, go for
I can just hang up on you and say something anyways. No, I'm kidding. But uh, so the
it.
Genius sacrifice started 2 days ago, or it started yesterday, and about $32 million has been sacrificed so far. What does that mean? That means people could have liquidated their tokens and have gotten about $32 million, but instead they decided to sacrifice it for the Genius project, the Genius Smart Financial Project, Genius Smart Financial Contract. Now there's a special bonus for when you sacrifice the legacy Genius token, which is the token that doesn't do any staking. You can't mine for extra Genius with this token. Let's call it the placeholder token, legacy GENI. With that token, when you sacrifice it, you get $3.33 worth of sacrifice points, regardless of the price of the Genius token. The current price of the Genius token, last I checked, was like $1.10. So it's about a third of the way there. So if you're looking to sacrifice, the best move you can make is to take advantage of this incentive, buy the placeholder token, and then sacrifice it out of circulation. So, dollar for dollar, you could say $10 million was sacrificed so far. Um, but considering the sacrifice points allocation, $32 million sacrificed in a little bit more than 24 hours. So that's awesome. Digital, I just wanted to say that real quick.
That's fantastic. In fact, that covers one of my line items. I know we get asked a lot of questions about that. The difference between that and minting, which maybe we'll come back to as we circle back to that, the sacrifice and what's going on with that. But yeah, I'm excited. It's pretty amazing what's going on. But so going back to the beginning, the idea behind this discussion, this live stream, is kind of a, even this happened the other day, I think, in the AMA, where maybe the interviewer doesn't know some of the questions to ask, what the community's been asking, and maybe 70% is about you, which, if you follow your channel, you cover a lot about yourself and your experience in crypto. What I wanted to do is get one big, piece, an interview with you about Genius, what it is, soup to nuts, all the details, all the questions we getting asked, with you effectively on camera. So, with that being said, unless there's somewhere else you wanted to start, I wanted to take you through a few questions and just start with, let's start with in as few of words as possible. What is the Genius Smart Contract or the Genius tokens?
Few words as possible. Genius is it's like a banking certificate of deposit, except it doesn't suck. It's on the blockchain. It's in the full control of the end user. And there's an artificial intelligence layer that operates its reward structure. So, artificial intelligence meaning there are formulas that take into account human actions, and this artificial intelligence determines how to incentivize users to protect the price. So, that's my few words as possible, but I'd like to add on to there. The Genius token was designed to appreciate in value. It was designed for the value to just go up over time and to defend itself against negative market activities, negative human behavior, and negative human sentiment. And it's, from my understanding, it's the first, one of the first smart contracts to do that.
And we'll dive deeper into all kind of aspects of that. But why did you develop this? What's the passion? What's the reason you you worked on this for a couple years now? Why did you do
Mhm.
it?
I started researching this about 5 years ago, um, and then just went total balls to the wall a little more than a year ago, um, and went hardcore like researching this about 2 years ago, uh, because I could see that, especially with what was going on in the DeFi world, or starting to go on in the DeFi world, was being promised from DeFi, from Ethereum, was that we could program a better store of value. Like Bitcoin was a great store of value, still a great store of value, and Bitcoin had its problems, has its problems. It's still great, but I could see that a product can be designed today, especially with the technology we have today. A product can be designed to be a much better store of value, to help people preserve their value and grow their value over time in one single asset. One single asset meaning you're not joining liquidity pools, you're not pairing two different tokens together. So I could see this as much as 5 years ago, but it especially started becoming a lot more alive 2 years ago, and that's when this became very appropriate entry time. Yeah, this is,
Gotcha.
by the way, this is a, I say this is like, this is what humanity, like governments and financial corporations, this is what these entities have been seeking to create anyways, to create for bankers, to create for average people, to create for small businesses, because people do look to store value and use it elsewhere, use it in the future, or make value from value, right? So this
Right.
is like a long time running attempt for humanity in general.
I know in one of our last calls you talked about doing research not just from a crypto perspective or on the project's perspective, but on I forget if it was the actual defense site that you were on, but just what's been going on with savings in general, particularly in the United States, but even more globally. Um, can you speak to that and what you found, how big that market is and what's going on there?
The savings market.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, a store of value, that industry itself is over 20 trillion. I mean, I've seen numbers like 26 trillion, but definitely at least a $20 trillion industry, and that covers time lock deposits in the United States of China. That covers more than 10 trillion for gold, uh, about a trillion for Bitcoin, or three quarters of a trillion, 800 million, whatever it's at, right? 800 billion, whatever it is at right now. Um, and in April 2020, you had, at least in the United States, one in every three households saving, and that was the highest rate of saving per household like ever in the United States history. Uh, and while running a savings company, I was the CEO for a savings company. I could see that um, a lot of people were saving for retirement. A lot of people were saving for an emergency situation, saving for a car or a home. It was all goal based, and everyone has this. Everybody has a goal of what they want to achieve. And ultimately, the most valuable thing a person has is their attention, their talents that they've built with their attention, the education they've gotten through their attention. And and this is just something inherently that almost all people want. I think the only people that don't want to save are children. It's just, you give them $5 and they want to spend it right away on toys.
I
So
don't, I, I
it,
don't know about you, but I used to hoard cash. Well,
yeah, I
I
spent
mean,
cash right away.
I was a weird old little man when I was like 5 years old. So, but I hear you definitely.
I was buying
Live
model
inside.
cars, like little model Lamborghinis and little model Ferraris, but these were awesome models that I was buying. These were like, as a little kid spending like $20 on them.
Oh,
It took me
cool.
forever to save for, like a week or something. But so here you have banks that have helped people with certificates of deposit, and a lot of the general sentiment for people is, okay, a certificate of deposit from a bank. Wow, I get 0.1% yield per year. That's terrible. Or a half a percent or 1%, if you're lucky or nice, or even more, depending on your position, your financial position, which is generally out of reach for your average person. And it's no secret to people that there's been so much corruption with banks and financial institutions. And that's why we have all these regulations in regards to it, for states and federal government, or other governments, wanting to protect people from these super, um, I guess you could say, like parasitic financial companies, or like they're predators. They're total
Right.
predators, and they prey on people. And this is just true. So people can feel this and they know this. While at the same time, there's people who use this to their advantage, and they use it very well. But what we have with blockchain technology is we can take out that human inefficiency, human greed. We can take out the bureaucracy of that. We can take out the a lot of worries and fears. Like I remember going to pay some developers who were overseas doing a very specialized software development, and you can't just find developers like what I was looking for. You just can't find them everywhere. You find them and you're like a beggar that cannot be a chooser, or whatever it's called. And so I went to send them a wire, and the bank was, asked me very politely, "Can you please give us a letter that says that you're not funding a war in Crimea?" I'm just like, "What the heck is Crimea?" Like, like I don't even know what you're talking about. That's kind of funny. Like, no, I'm not funding a war with this like $5,000 or whatever it was.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, so
Unbelievable.
get that bureaucracy out of finance. We can do that today. And so the Genius Smart Financial Contract, the Genius token, uh, that's a huge point of what it will deliver. Get people, get rid of the bankers, get rid of the middlemen, get rid of the people that are paranoid that you're gonna fund wars with your $200 or your $1,000, and get rid of the people that you have to ask permission to do things, and have a better store of value. When you're storing in U.S. dollar, it's not a good idea. A lot of people aren't aware of this, so the Genius token and the Genius sacrifice is to get people re-aware of financial freedom, transactional freedom, and the whole thing that was a big deal over 200 years ago in the first place. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
There's so many directions to go in. Like just that. I mean, I don't mind it, or I don't know if you mind, but like the whole reason I got into crypto was exactly um, essentially what you described here. I learned about money systems, about the Federal Reserve, about how the money had changed before, or like at least in the United States, America's currency had been moved the control center from the state level to an institutional level with something that happened in the early 20th century, and I saw the problems or the issues that come into play when maybe someone that doesn't have your best interest, or even like what is it, ultimate power corrupts, and ultimate power corrupts absolutely, or something. There's some saying like that. So
Mm-hmm.
the whole reason that I'm in crypto is because I see this as a tool for us to get back a large part of our essentially sovereignty, as well as like speech. I think of money systems as literally a language. It's a tool, and if someone else is in control of that, manipulating that, economists really do a great job defining this. And in fact, something I haven't heard them say, but I was thinking about this the other day. You look at interest rates over the last 20 to 40 years, and you look at the culture, especially in the West and the United States, and it's almost exactly like inflation, zooms up, interest rates zoom down, and the kind of the culture, you know, does what it's doing. And some people think it's maybe not such a great direction, and some people seem to be okay with it. But
Yeah.
um, so one thing you mentioned, store of value, and Bitcoin having its problems. I don't want to get too off topic. I do want to keep it centered on genius, but what do you think makes a good store of value? And if you could touch on it briefly about why Bitcoin, or what kind of
Yeah.
problems Bitcoin has.
Okay. So, what makes a good store of value is your question, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. uh, well, one, where do I start with this? One thing that makes a good store of value really is it scarce? Um, is it not going to have this finite supply that keeps going? Like you can't use sand to store your value because there's so much sand everywhere. Your ability to transfer it from one area to another to use it, to use it, period, to take it out of its storage. That's really important. Um, fundamentally, I strongly believe this has been like a 5-year research project for me. That the thing that is valuable, inherently valuable in this universe, right? If you can capture that, then that's going to be a great storage of value. And so that's something scarce, right? But a big problem is that a lot of things in our world are not scarce. You have Bitcoin that is scarce, 21, 23, I don't remember how many million units. Um, but you have human attention that is super scarce. Like a lot of people like to say that time is scarce. And how do you encapsulate time? Uh, but human attention is a very scarce thing. And really, the only scarce thing in this universe has to do with humanity. Like, is water scarce? No, not really. But it can be scarce depending on your situation. Is land scarce? Not really. I mean, if you do the math, you'll find that on Earth alone, with the population density of New York City, you can fit more than 1 trillion people on Earth, and possibly even 14 trillion. So, okay, so then that's not scarce. So what makes a good store of value? Being able to store it. I know that sounds really obvious, but being able to store it is huge, is very important. And it not being easy to counterfeit is super important. And it has to mimic, while being transferable and extremely hard to counterfeit. Um, it has to mimic value. And the only two things that I've found in the universe that are scarce, that truly are scarce, uh, is our own attention, which the Genius token mimics, and our intentions, like the ability for us to keep our promise or keep our focus on whatever our focus is being kept on.
Right, right.
And that
Well,
Genius as well captures that.
gotcha. And I wanted to kind of, that's the direction I was heading in, because in studying some very, very ancient money systems, there have been cultures where they had like a big tablet or big stone, a giant boulder, and they would mark things. This is how I recall. It's been a couple of years, and the idea was like some people, you watch what's that movie? It's there's 3 parts to it. It's about the dollar, 9/11, and Christianity. You remember what movie I'm talking about? There's like 1, 2, 3.
Now,
Zeitgeist.
okay, I was gonna say I watch so little movies that it's pretty bad. Like with my knowledge of movies, like I was in this relationship, long term relationship, long ago, and this girl, she knew like everything about movies, and I didn't know anything about movies. So there was like a bar game, which was, hey, who can say 10 movies that this girl hasn't seen and say 10 movies that this guy Robert has seen? And yeah. Then when they figured out that I've seen a lot of Disney movies, then they'd get all the movies.
Oh, gotcha.
But that guy.
Yeah, so Zeitgeist, it became kind of this interesting meme that happened in early 2000s. Like, oh, there's debt attached to every dollar, which is the way it's set up, in my opinion. There is a problem with it. But ironically, like what I think the fundamental basis of money is a promise from one person to another. And so, the representation of that is a debt. I did something, or I gave you something, and then the debt is to be repaid with the tool. So a debt-based, yeah, can you guys hear me okay? A debt-based money system is nothing, it is the fundamental basis of all money, in my opinion. And, it's just kind of a dirty way of saying.
And all debt is an intention. All debt is an intention in your promise. Yeah.
Exactly. We're humans. We're working together. We're trying to achieve something. I'm hungry, or you've worked, and I want your good or service or your production or your attention or whatever it is, and I'm going to give you something for that, and you'll give me something in return. So it's a promise, and that is one of the reasons I think these staking kind of tokens in particular have done well. Things like Bitcoin has done well, is because you kind of mapped the real world into the digital essentially, and it provides all kinds of
Yeah,
interesting.
we're ready for that today. We're ready
Right,
for
and
that.
the way you defined it the other day, in fact, was because I kind of got it wrong. Where we were at dinner the other night, Robert and I, and I mentioned like the way I see Ethereum. It's kind of how I used to see Bitcoin as this
Uh-huh.
internet of value. And you're like, yeah, kind of, but it allows you to, what was it, like amplify?
Yeah, to amplify your value, amplify your ability to transact,
Yeah,
amplify.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. You put it on.
Yeah, I'm putting this jacket on. It's cold in here, and I had this extra
You're going
light that
in
I
the
wanted.
opposite direction.
Yeah, it's cold in here, and I wanted to get rid of that extra light.
So we went through that. Store value. So going back, like I think we're gonna get into the meat and potatoes of everything's a food analogy. I'm hungry.
Yeah,
And
you're
how
hungry.
GENI works. But before we do,
Well,
so can you explain the main differentiators between this and like a conventional CD, which might be a little bit too easy, but then other staking tokens that are out
sure, sure. Well, let's pick a staking token.
there? Right? Your choice, host choice.
I mean, I'd like to pick Hex because I'm a Hexkin. I love Hex. I have multiple, 5555 Hex stakes. Big believer in Hex, and I'm not saying anything bad about it, other than it does have flaws. I love it. So let's compare with that. A lot of people know about Hex too. Hex is easily the number 3 cryptocurrency in the world. So we can use that as a baseline.
Yep.
Cool. I have you right next to the microphone, by the way.
Okay.
It seems to be doing a
Can
lot better like that.
everybody hear me okay? I see we've got 14 people.
Yeah. Can you all hear him? Okay, 50-50. Seems to be cutting out every couple sentences. All right. Well, I think we're good. I think we're good. All right, yeah. So I'm sorry, I'm a little lost. What are we talking about? Staking tokens. We're gonna get
Just
into the meat and potatoes.
how this compares to other staking tokens, and you said, let's talk about Hex because you're a big Hex skin.
Okay. Yeah, I mean Hex. I would say Hex is the first token to show that a you can design a token to appreciate in value. Hex was the first token to really show that possibility. Now, granted, that possibility opened it up to about 10,000 folding in price. So multiplying in price by 10,000 in less than 2 years. And that's huge. I don't know. There's a bit of problems with sustaining it since it's worth it to break your promises with Hex. It's worth it to break your stakes. But Hex was super influential. I've seen so many releases of tokens over the last like multiple years, and Hex has one of the best launches. So Hex was really like a roadmap of like, hey, this is possible. And the possibility that it made, I would call it like the tokens of the future are tokens that amplify value. Tokens that are specifically, well, when it comes to finances, tokens that are specifically designed to increase in value over time and preserve value, increase in value over time, appreciate in value, and have utility, have as much utility with that. That's what people are looking for. That's a more than $20 trillion industry. And almost everybody is saving for their future and has goals. So
Gotcha.
Genius and many others, others before Genius that had attempted this as well. There are some that weren't successful. There are some that, in my understanding, are still working and kind of successful, like Wise. Wise being one of the tokens. And so this is clearly the future, a protocol that defines how we store our value.
So, can we get more specific on?
Yeah.
And I know actually just before we started this call or video, the site got listed. GENI, I'm not sure which site got listed. I think it was geniustoken.com, which is a community-driven site, not the main one. But some Mexicans saw it and they said, "Hey guys, be careful." A lot of people trying to snap up that sweet pulse and it's coming out. And people doing airdrops.
Yeah, everybody wants that sweet pulse.
Right. So be careful, y'all. So what do you see as, since you said Hex is another staking token, what do you see as the main differences between Genius and Hex? Why is Genius better? What does it do that Hex doesn't? Or maybe it's complementary. What do you see there?
There's a ton of different reasons, and it depends on how you look at it. It depends on what your priorities are. So your question is, okay, what are key differences between Genius and Hex? Well, first of all, one thing that, I'm over here thinking to myself, should these answers help hexagons understand the difference, or should these answers help people in general understand the difference? One very clear difference is with Hex, you can lock up your tokens for 5,555 days. With Genius, it's 4,444 days. But to the hexagon, you see Pulse Chain. You mentioned Pulse Chain. Pulse Chain came about mainly because, a vulnerability that Hex and Genius have is that they rely so much on the substrate that they're executed upon. So Hex greatly relied on Ethereum and Ethereum's rules, ever-changing rules. And so, like a year ago, something like that, more than a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, Ethereum made the gas rate a lot more expensive when you were doing a certain operation, when your contract was reading from disk. And this affected Hex greatly because you would have your average person with $100 stake, or about $100, or a $50 stake. You'd have your average person at the time. They would have these Hex stakes that they would claim, that they would end the stake. And they would end the stake after like 365 days. They would end the stake after 400 days, maybe 500 days or 600 days. And they would find that the gas fee to unstake cost more than their principal and interest. So it wasn't even worth it. So here's someone in the Hex community where they put money away for 90 days or so, or 100 days, whatever it is. They wanted to store their value. They wanted to get some nice gains. They wanted to earn decentralized interest, decentralized rewards. And then suddenly when they go to unstake it, they're surprised by the gas fees. And they're like, wow, it's not even worth it for me to unstake this. Now, of course, this problem didn't happen with whales. But what I'm getting at is this was such a big problem that that Richard Hart and them were like, yeah, this is BS. All right, let's make our own Ethereum. I mean, it was more complex than that. So now the Hex contract is very optimized for gas, but there are some methods that just are not optimized. For example, the end stake fee. With the Genius smart contract, I mean, the Genius is going to be on Ethereum and it's going to be on Pulse Chain. Any project out there would be shooting itself in the foot not to be on Pulse Chain. Pulse Chain is going to be awesome. Sure, I haven't seen it. I don't really know that, but the ideas behind it, these are huge. So with Genius, when you end your stake, it can cost as much as 90% less than ending your stake in Hex. And that's massive. That's huge. Because everybody's really excited that they're going to have inexpensive ways to end their hex stakes in the future. But the reality is, when you have something like Pulse Chain that has a limited supply and it's only losing supply more and more over time, sure, Pulse Chain might have 4 times the throughput or 4 times the bandwidth compared to Ethereum, but with the supply of Pulse constantly getting lower and lower over time, price of Pulse is going to rise over time, or likely is going to rise as people use it. So technically, your fees could end up being much more expensive than even on Ethereum. And if there were any diehard Hexagon fans here, they'd be like, "Kill the infidel!" They'd probably want to kill me for that. But it's true. So this is inevitably going to be a problem with Hex again, and hopefully that's not a problem in a long time. That gives people utility today. But Genius has some very intelligent ways of making things cost less.
Gotcha.
That's one big difference that that concerns people now that they've run into this sudden issue where it costs so much to unstake.
Right. I can't believe how many people, I've been onboarding people since 2012 into crypto, especially
Nice.
lately. Yeah, it's pretty amazing what's happened with, very simple wallets, like the whole DeFi space, everything that has gone on in quote unquote Web3 is fantastic. But then the only problem is you try to get them actually into something and they realize, wait a second, like just happened yesterday. Guy wanted to buy $50 worth of Genius, for example. And he noticed, okay, you move that from an exchange account into his MetaMask. And it was, a couple dollars. Luckily, it wasn't too bad. But then you moved it. You tried to do
What were the fees?
Yeah, it was. It wasn't too bad for me, but he was like, "Geez, this is, what is 12%, 15%? It's like $7." And he was like, "This is ridiculous. I'm not doing this." So, I totally understand, and I told him some of the fees that I've seen, and it is. I think like from an onboarding perspective, regardless of your token, it's absolutely needed. What Richard Hart and everybody's doing as far as Pulse, and it's hopefully it extends the length of maybe not a long-term solution as you're saying for now, but they're able to continue to onboard people and
let me just say,
space better.
Yeah, Ethereum, right? What you're getting on is the fact that Ethereum has priced out so many people, and a contract or a blockchain is only really, it has more value when people aren't shut out from it. And that's what had Bitcoin be super, super successful. In the banking system, the banks, if you're somebody that's not on their team or they don't like you, or you're funding some war that's not their war or whatever, they're mad about it. But Bitcoin's just Bitcoin's like whatever.
You got cameras saying you're funding a war.
No, it's an example. And I know, right? And I'll never have a bank account again because of it. But so Ethereum priced people out, and and now when it comes to the Genius sacrifice, this is where you have a lot of people sacrificing on the Binance Smart Chain because it costs significantly less for them to do that, and they're going to get a piece of Genius token of its initial supply of the official token that you can do staking and everything. You can mine for more Genius, so they pay less fees to do that, and they will get their Genius token on the Ethereum network, which has the large fees, and the awesome Pulse Chain network that will surely start with very low fees. So your friend, and with onboarding, people who want to try this and learn, like with $10, $50, $100, there's incredible education that people can learn for this. So everybody watching this, if you haven't done this so far, this is an incredible educational opportunity for you. You'll learn at best. So Binance Smart Chain is just gonna cost less to sacrifice from. think
Gotcha.
that's why Pulse Chain's coming around. Lower fees, lower
Well,
fees.
and again, do you plan to place, have a version of the Genius contract on finance?
Okay, so is there a plan for Genius to be on Binance Smart Chain? Maybe not, but it's being considered. I mean, Pulse Chain's gonna rock, right? But we gotta think about longevity. We gotta think about a lot of things because the substrate that Genius is on is really important. So that's a maybe on Binance Smart Chain. Ultimately, there's nothing stopping people from grabbing the contract and putting it on Binance Smart Chain. So this is all being considered. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
I don't know what I
Good.
wonder what the community thinks, right? Like have some polls. Like should it be on Binance Smart Chain? Um, I think Pulse Chain is an option that I think is going to be great for one, and two, with Richard Hart's leadership and other people's leadership. Pulse Chain, I really think is going to keep the small guy in mind. The small guy being somebody who can't spend $100 to $200 and sometimes $1,000 just to unstake or just to use a smart contract. Pulse Chain started with keeping the little guy in mind and having everybody a part of it. So Pulse Chain, the leadership could stay like that. So
Gotcha.
I'm super bullish on Pulse Chain.
So I'm taking kind of a giant step back in a way. Maybe we recenter on kind of what we're alluding to here as far as, we're talking about Hex and kind of some of the differences between Hex and Genius. Can you explain how Genius works? Specifically, I know we've gone over some of the features. You've mentioned some in passing here, but just the things that, essentially bullet points. This.
Sure.
Can you go through something like that for me?
Okay, so you're asking me to go through the process of how someone would use Genius.
Yeah,
and that's good.
Maybe the things happening behind the scenes as far as why you chose them, what they're doing, etc. For example,
gotcha.
I know that negative price protection is something we've talked about and how that works through using AI.
Yeah. All right, that's a lot of info. So let's start with so with Genius, this is what it'll look like when you have the token where you can mine for more Genius, earn passive income, save for the future, have CD ladders for more financially savvy people that are aware of that, save for retirement. That's the idea. And this is what it looks like. You have when you take part of this sacrifice event, which is you pledging to, pledging for financial freedom, well, there's going to be an airdrop. And people who sacrifice, they'll receive an airdrop. And once you have your Genius token, well, what does that look like? It looks like every other token right now. You can put liquidity, and that's an advanced concept. You can sell your Genius token. You can buy more. You can just hold on to it. But you can use a decentralized app, basically a website. Use it with MetaMask. An app will allow you to do something special with your Genius token. It'll allow you to take your Genius token to mine for more Genius token, sort of like Bitcoin mining. And this is called staking as well. It's called yield farming, etc. So what that'll look like with the app is, you'll go to the app, you'll say you want to start a new miner or do some Genius mining. And the app will ask you, okay, how much of your Genius do you want to stake? How much of your Genius do you want to use for mining? And then we'll ask you, okay, how long do you want your Genius to be mining for more Genius? So you tell it, 1 day, you tell it 30 days, you tell it any amount of days up to 4,444 days, or a little more than 12 years. And then the app will ask you to choose a different mode. There's two modes. One is simple, one's advanced. The simple mode is meant to mimic low risk, low reward. And the advanced mode is meant to mimic high risk, high reward. The only risk being whether or not you need to prematurely end your genius mining to to get your genius back and to get any any interest, any yield, extra genius rewards, etc., etc. So in summary, you'll use this app to pledge an amount of genius, to pledge an amount of time that your genius will be locked within the network, and whether you want it to be low risk, low reward, or high risk, high reward. You hit go, and then this is like you've created your very own time locked capsule that is mining for genius for you. And every day you get paid a passive income off that. That passive income you get paid, that's put into your genius miner. And at the end of all the days that you have pledged to keep that there, you get your reward. You get all of the rewards. You get the genius that you originally set aside, and you get the extra genius that was earned by mining for genius.
Gotcha.
So that's a lot of words of what it'll look like. When you see it, it's probably going to be like 10 seconds of doing things or 20 seconds of doing things.
Right. You make a peanut butter sandwich, right?
Let me tell you how to make a peanut butter sandwich with genius.
Right. One thing there, though, the difference between, I know in the white paper it's called advanced stakes and simple stakes, and that, complicated sounding. But, one differentiator here that I see, that if you could speak to it, is literally that with the simple stakes, you get less APY, less yield, less, it's kind of like you own a less powerful miner almost, if you use the Bitcoin analogy. But there's no risk to your principal in terms of if you decide to break your promise. Is that correct?
Correct. The low risk, the simple mode. In the simple mode, if you have to end early, if you have to break your promise and not hold for so many days, not mine for so many days, the worst case scenario is that you'll lose the rewards that you receive for mining. You won't lose the actual, like, the original amount of genius that you put forward.
Okay.
And then with the advanced one, so the advanced mode is for people, like in an advanced mode, if someone's gonna lock up their genius for 200 days, this is the person who does this should know, okay, that genius, I'm not gonna want to liquidate that for 200 days. I'm not gonna want to do that. So this is someone who should be in a position where they have a lot more discipline, a lot more financial discipline, or just fun discipline, I guess you could call it, because a lot of people call this magic internet money. Yeah, but somebody who is using the simple mode, maybe they're mining, they have their genius locked up and mining for 200 days, and they think, well, day 100 I might need it, I don't know. And if they do, sure, they'll lose some of their rewards. Worst case scenario, they lose all their rewards, but they lose some of their rewards. And, so they had low risk, but then that is reflected on low reward.
Gotcha.
The advanced stakes, one thing though, the advanced stakes are they're like hex stakes on steroids. Let's just put it that way. I don't know about on steroids.
Yeah. Is that something you can get into or share right now? I mean, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for one, the reason why I say on steroids is when you are a simple miner, when you're mining for genius in the simple mode, you only earn the base rewards that are given yearly. And that's about 4.23% of the genius supply. The supply and circulation, or the total supply in general. So with simple stakes, with simple mining stakes, you only get the base rewards. Now, in the advanced mining stakes, on the advanced mode, you get the base APY, or the base rewards, the base yearly rewards, but you also get a portion of like everybody else on the network who has broken their promises and has paid some sort of fee on their yield or fee on their rewards, or they've paid some sort of fee for, you know, for whatever reason. Those fees, a majority of those fees go to the advanced miners. So when you have the advanced mode, when you're on the advanced mode, you can lose your principal, and that's not going to be fun, right? But although you could lose your principal, you're also receiving the fees from everybody else. So in the hex world, this is how all of the hex stakes work. People get penalized for ending their stakes early. People get penalized for breaking their promises, and then half of those rewards are given to the origin address, or they're given to probably one person that, hopefully they don't get their wallet hacked, and then some weird problems happen. That probably won't happen, or maybe it does. I don't know. I hope it doesn't. I hope it doesn't. That'll be very bad for me. And then the other half of the fees are distributed between all of the hex stakeholders. Well, in the Genius Smart Financial Contract, it's like 60 something percent of the fees are given to all of the advanced mode miners. And like there's like a small percentage, like 8% that is given to the origin address. And then another portion of that is burnt in a way that doesn't lower people's rewards, but keeps them doing awesome.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So my channel is, I used to do a lot of videos on like fruit, eating fruit, and health stuff. And I've got a bit of an ASMR voice. So if I'm putting you to sleep, just be like, hey, Robert, let's talk about something else.
Oh, no. Weirdly enough, I do love your voice. I literally will watch you at night sometimes just because it is so soothing.
Oh, thank you. I listen to my own voice and fall asleep.
I masturbate in front of a mirror.
Oh my God. This is a child channel. No, it's not. I specifically said this is not for children. So you're okay. You can talk about that.
Yeah, good. Yeah, we were supposed to have fun with this, right?
Yeah.
So, from my perspective, then I see kind of, this video is for all kinds of audiences. People we've been onboarding who are brand new to crypto, and then your extreme seasoned professionals and really technical people that are like, why do they have so many bots on their damn Twitter account? Which is another, oopsie by me engaging with the wrong kind of promoter. But so I see kind of three different things here, right? So if someone gets into something like Genius, they can just hold it in their wallet, and that's it. Or they participate in mining and staking, which we're going to get back to, right? At the advanced level or the simple level, depending on their comfort level, depending on their needs, their level of commitment, et cetera, et cetera. And so the first bucket,
by the way, you're going to see me walking around. Just want to give you a heads up.
Okay, no problem. The first bucket is sorry, I was watching the video and the feed. I was watching you. The first bucket of people that hold the tokens, right? They just buy them on the market and hold them, and that's kind of where I started with Hex.
Yeah.
And one goal for people like that is just simply for the token to progress, for it to get more expensive and
appreciate in value over time.
To appreciate in value. Now, you've mentioned a few times that there's some sort of tools in place to continue to incentivize the whole network, the whole community for that asset, for this underlying asset, for Genius to continue to appreciate. Can you speak to that, like how it does that?
Yeah. I see that Lamar Jones in the chat asked similar question. So you're asking about, hey, what's the problem being solved in the first place? But, where does the AI come into play, and how are people being incentivized to keep their promises? So to make it in a short answer, AI, being formulas that depend on human activity and work with algorithmically creating the best outcome of human activity, or the computer's activity, what'll be the best outcome. And the AI layer, the formulas, they're working to see how many people are breaking their promises, right? How many people are, when someone created a promise, when someone breaks a promise, whether it's a simple mining operation or an advanced mining operation. And the formulas will update um, other people's penalties. So, for example, well, for this to make sense, let's talk about a very common problem in Hex. So Hex, uh, um, Hex is amazing. It does really well in price to a point. There was a time where Hex was making all-time highs every 6 months, right? That's not the case right now. That's okay. But when Hex, in the Hex land, you have your stake and you don't want to end it early. You don't want to break your promise. You don't want to end your stake before you said you would, right? But then a lot of times your fee a lot of times comes out to 5%. So 5% of your principal. And by the way, Hex, the fees will eat into the principal, and sometimes will eat the entire principal. And that's what Genius did with simple stakes. The fees won't eat into your principal, so that's good. But getting back to the problem with Hex, the price may have, in a 1 year period, let's say a 1 year period for a Hex stake that promised it would end in 2 years, the price of Hex has 100-fold in price. Now, when the price goes up 100-fold, the person who's been holding, since that 1x, like since, let's say, a penny to $1, or 1/100th of a penny to 1 penny, the person's holding, when they go to sell, they've got 100 times more volume that they're going to be pushing that price down. It's going to be a lot of selling pressure. Because, I mean, hey, if you're someone who bought $1,000 with Hex and then 100-fold later, you have 100 grand. That's a lot more volume than somebody buying $1,000 or selling $1,000. So with Hex, the idea was, well, you're going to get a fee though. You promised to do this for 2 years. It's been 1 year. It's 100-fold in price. And don't quote me on this, but your fee is probably going to be, you lose your interest and only your interest. So you'll lose 18%. So maybe your stake was $118,000 or $116,000, $112,000. And this depends on a lot of math, so don't hold me 100% to this, but it's pretty close. Okay, so what? Okay, great. So if I break my promise, I miss out on 18 grand, but still I had $1,000 worth of Hex when I started go to $100,000. Hell yeah, I'm gonna break my promise. Yeah, I'm gonna break my promise and capture that. Especially I should when other people are breaking their promises because their fees are minuscule. Yeah, heck yeah, let me do that. So this is what happens in the Hex world. So while you're somebody holding and you're getting half of the fees generated, you're getting half of the fees of interest, and that really isn't too interesting. Sure, it's great. If let's say you have a Hex stake and your average payout per day is $100, that's awesome, right? And then when a lot of people are breaking their promises, your daily earnings could be as much as $500. Awesome. Like that's like people's dream, right? But the problem here is that it's worth it for people to break their promises. It's worth it to break their promise. And for those of you falling asleep with me talking, just listen to this while you sleep. It will get in your brain and your soul. In Genius, Genius doesn't allow that to happen. Sure, people can be breaking their promises early, but in Genius, it will multiply. Genius will multiply the fees to eventually make it not worth it for people to break their promises. Well, I don't know about not worth it, but I think it's better to say if they break their promises, it's just not nearly as lucrative, even if the price went up 100-fold, even if the price went up 10,000-fold. So this is super novel what Genius does. Genius watches the market and it watches how worth it is for people to break their promise, and it actively changes its reward structure to something that's very predictable. um, to incentivize people like, hey, you want to break your promise, and
I'll break your legs.
exactly, you're going to be swimming with the fishes. Yeah. So by the way, the Genius token is a very physically dangerous one. No, it's not. But in all honesty, here it's like, in Hexland, that's great. You can, uh, people in Hex have, let's say, invested. Let's call it investing, right? They've invested $1,000, goes up 1,000-fold. That's $1,000,000. It's $1,000,000. Let's say over a year it did that. Well, in the last year, the best Hex did was over 100-fold. But let's say over 2 years, your $1,000 turns into $1,000,000. That's super life changing money. You can do a lot with your desires. So that's gonna bring the price down a good amount, or at least it's gonna affect the price a lot more than $1,000. But what you'll probably find in Genius is, okay, this was originally $1,000, and let's say the price is $1,000,000 today, and you have $200,000 in interest. Um, Genius's AI will eventually say, well, if you're in the advanced mode, cool, you did amazing. You did great. However, you can finish your promise and have $1.2 million, or you can end your promise now and it's more like $2,000 you get. So Genius, Genius uses phi and a different kind of parabolic thing going on mathematically, to make this to make this to make it worth it for you to keep your promise. And I'm laughing about somebody saying that they fell asleep during my last video. Great, good. People advertise that Calm app, which this should be sponsored by Calm app. But screw Calm app. Just listen to listen to my YouTube. It doesn't, there's no monetization or anything like that. And you won't hear advertisements in your dream. You'll just hear me go on and on and on.
You'll have a bunch of steaks and.
Can I say one thing though?
Steaks. Yeah.
Um, so check this out. If you're listening, you want to pay attention to this. So sure, Hex will eat into your principal too, especially if you're ending a stake that is a long-term stake, like a 4-year stake, and you want to end your promise only 1 year into those 4 years. There are many instances where with Hex, you'll lose all your principal. But if you have a Hex stake and you're going to lose all your principal, you technically have no utility for that. And that's where things like Hedron have come into play. So you have no utility. Now, with the Genius Smart Financial Contract, you always have utility for your stake, for your mining stakes, for your Genius miners. You always have utility. So if the penalties for ending early and breaking your promise, if those penalties are so massive that you're going to lose all your value, well, you always have a backup plan with Genius, and that you don't have that with Hex. And the backup plan is you can always liquidate your stakes. So you can always liquidate your mining operation. What does liquidating do? It's more of an auction. What the liquidating does is it allows someone else to take ownership of your stake. It allows someone else to take ownership of completing your promise for you. And the mechanics behind that, sure, it gives somebody liquidity for their stake, and it also, for an emergency situation. So the person still has utility for their stake. The promise is still carried out for the network. And the auctioning that goes on for transferring that stake ends up being mathematically good for everybody. More information in the white paper on that.
Gotcha. So I want to kind of go full circle and then kind of come back to what you just said. But, so you're saying basically the AI is paying attention to the market, incentivizes people to not break their promise.
Yeah.
And is it that parabolic that, if you had, like, is it a good estimate to say if you had $1,000 staked for some period and now, it's worth, potentially $1 million, if you unstake early, even if it's close to the end, or maybe you can give us an approximation, that it will basically forfeit the entire thing and say, you get $2,000. So there's another kind of layer of incentive almost to do, this other option
Yeah,
of,
this
of
liquidation option.
essentially liquidating the stake to someone else. And that makes total sense to me in terms of like, okay, if I could buy a stake that's worth 1.2 million for $500,000, the guy gets $500,000, and I get potential. I got to fulfill the rest of the promise, and obviously, I think the longer it is, the more discounted it would be.
Yeah, well,
But
if I may just cut you off there real quick.
yeah,
All right, you could respond like, well, you already did, but I thank you. I appreciate your friendliness on that. Um, I gotta say though, anybody listening to this that pays attention to tokenomics and thinks about them a lot, thinks about how they're gonna affect everybody, um, they might be worried about that. Like, well, hold on, this person gets what, 1 million liquidity, anyways. They get that 1,000x and dump on the market. It's not exactly the case. They do get liquidity, but I would urge people who are curious about this to look at the tokenomics, to look at the white paper. Just go to the web domain, type in geni.us/smart contract. That's geni.us, genius/smart contract. And let me just say, this is done in a way that benefits everyone on the network. So if someone has to liquidate, right, in an emergency situation, and they don't want to like kill their operations where they lose all their principal and everything, they choose to liquidate. This is done in a way that also benefits everybody who's not liquidating. And also, the tokenomics of this, the game theory of this, can potentially then help people who are just holding for trading purposes, even though I don't recommend people trade. So this is an action that helps everyone. For people who understand Hex, creating a stake, creating a promise that you're going to hold on to your Hex, lock it up for 1,000 days, that benefits everyone and that benefits the market. And then ending your stake prematurely also benefits everyone in the Hex world. Then again, it doesn't benefit everyone if they're dumping and they've had massive gains from that. And that's cool. That's a good reason to like Hex. What it turns into though is it doesn't mean that Hex is only going to go up and to the right all the time. It's actually a terrible pumpamental that Hex has. So in the Genius world, right? This liquidation part. Well, in the Genius world, you have you create a mining stake, so you're mining for Genius. Same thing as a stake in Hex. Different, but it's the same idea. That benefits everyone in the network. That benefits the market. When you unstake, that also benefits the market. In the same ways as well that Hex people unstaking benefit the market. It drives the share price up. It drives it drives up something else that we can talk about. That's very good for the industry, very good for the market. But now with Genius, you have extra utility, the ability to liquidate your stakes instead of just nuke them. And that also benefits everyone in the ecosystem. So, every fundamental of Genius every fundamental in Genius has the intention of making it worth it for everyone. Even the person who has to take a hit. And this is, these are tokenomics that have taken more than a year to work out, of very intelligent minds looking at these issues, simulating them, making Python apps to simulate them, Sigma 4, spreadsheets that isolated very specific issues. A lot of really smart people worked on this, and people who understood problems with Hex, people who understood problems with Bitcoin, people who understood the things that were advantageous about the tokenomics of many other things. And what it resulted in is Genius being able to stake, unstake, liquidate, etc.
Gotcha. Fantastic. We've really gotten through a ton of my questions here, and I hope that answers the which user was that? That's Lamar Jones's question on the AI. and how it's utilized, as well as Dane's on the 100x. What happens in that case. So let's see. You did touch on the tokenomics, and that's a really good place to continue. I think I do have a few questions regarding that. Let's see. We talked about the 1 year. In our back and forth, over the past few weeks, you mentioned what you saw. Well, can you speak to one thing I thought was amazing is that you took real world data and then you applied it to these like various scripts you've created. Can you speak to that and also like what you saw? And then, well, let's start there. And I've got one more question for you.
Okay. I don't understand the question. How's the boot this? Let me. A boot. How's the boot this? What, man? I'm part Canadian. I'm not part Canadian. Let me be right back.
Well, I just like, can you speak to how you imported, real transactions and what you saw from that? Like, I just think that is a pretty interesting idea. And you specifically, relating to X because it is a, kind of similar tool.
Sure. Yeah. Let me step away. Everybody can look at my official office real quick. Let me step away. I'll be right back. Okay. Really, I'm gonna go get an answer from that. I'm gonna call a lifeline. No, I'm not gonna do that. Oh, good question. Crap. Let me get out of here. No, 1 sec.
Okay. And now what do I do? Can everybody hear me? By the way, I mean, I know we kind of had some technical difficulties in the beginning. So we ended up just putting the phone close to his microphone. I see there's 17 people in here. And everybody can hear me okay, huh? Oh, nobody's typing. Jessica Elizabeth Reagan. Can you hear me? Nope. Oh, there we go. All right, cool. Good. Thank you, guys. So I don't know if everybody tuned in at the beginning of this, but the main goal for this was no matter the audience, if you're brand new to crypto or if you've been in the space for a while, if you're a Mexican, because that kind of happened the second we started this, there was this post that happened on Twitter. So I think we've got a few guys from Twitter that came from that, kind of centered around the Extra Pulse community. Is just what is Genius? What are we trying to do? All in one, complete package. I had some questions that I drafted beforehand, and then, of course, if there's any that we don't cover that anybody here has, to answer those, towards the end. And then the idea for this is eventually just kind of cutting it up into pieces, because we get a ton of questions on the sacrifice, which Robert answered in the beginning, how the sacrifice works, how there was a legacy token, how there's an incentive to buy the legacy token and sacrifice that specifically. And sounds low quality and muffled. Yeah, unfortunately, David, it's because we had some technical difficulties, and the last minute thing we had to do was just set up Robert's phone next to his microphone. We couldn't get both feeds into his system the way it's set up because of time. But hopefully, everybody can hear me. And I'm just trying to go over the kind of the major goals of this. And I'd say we're about 75% of the way through. But if anybody has any questions that we haven't covered, please feel free to put them in the chat.
I'm back.
Hey.
Hey.
Missed you.
Oh, I missed you too. So loud and clear. People can hear you perfectly, right?
Yeah, except for one. But yeah, pretty good. I think it sounds good.
So you're a little low, muffled, and you're on the phone, and so I've been repeating your questions. I think this will be great for the ASMR people. I can talk like this in the microphone, and then everybody loves to fall asleep while someone talks on the phone, and that's you.
Right. Give us your sexiest voice. Speak more to the tokenomics and what you saw when you imported. Like how you mentioned to me that you imported real world data. What did you do there? What did you see as far as Genius is concerned?
Yeah. Well, this depends a lot on AI and how AI sorry, not this depends a lot on. It's actually like a really complicated project, and the data for it, it's going to need some time to put it into human words. Um, but in general, like a good way to put it in general is what you currently have what you currently have with, like, let's say hex, right? Is you have a graph that can look many different ways. And by the way, I'm trying to figure out, I'm doing my hand like this. Is it going up and to the left, up and to the right? I don't know. Um, the best way to say it is how it looks. With hex, for example, what the end game might look like for hex, right? And it's very difficult to predict this. Um, is you have hex going up in price, just like killing it, just like murdering faces, right? And then it has a good like 80% dip, right? It goes up again, 80% dip, right? Up again, 80% dip. Or another way is, goes up a ton and then it dips, goes up almost to where it dipped before, or almost as high as it went before, dips almost as low, up. And and with the genius, you have something that looks. It depends on a lot of factors, and it's really difficult to say. But price wise, you have something that almost looks like a limit curve going upwards to a point, and then it shoots up again for another limit, and it shoots up again for another limit. Yeah. So to answer your question, it's really not an easy question to answer with words. Graphs can be very helpful, but ultimately, what we're learning a lot from is piping in all of all of the data of people trading, buying, and selling hex, and having stakes with hex and unending stakes with hex, and seeing how that will work with Genius. But there's some really difficult problems, very difficult problems, because Genius is a completely different smart contract, and there are two modes of staking. I mean, doing two modes of staking is probably, I wouldn't recommend any smart contract does this unless they're paying a lot of attention to how those will interact with each other, and it's astronomically more complex. So there's really no clear answer to what you're asking right now. Something that, I mean, there is a clear answer, but as far as it being communicated, it's really difficult. One thing I can say is some insight that I've personally learned from doing that, and have had different discussions with the smart contract developer who's been looking over the research and development, and as well the tokenomics research and development. One is that Hex has benefited whales greatly. I mean, it started with benefiting Bitcoin whales, and you know, Hex doesn't have burnamentals inherently, and Genius does have burnamentals. But one thing you have, like with Hex, for example, is you'll have whales that dump on everyone like every 7 days. Like, for example, with Hex, you see um, I hate continuously using an example with Hex, but it kind of teaches people what sort of problems can happen when you have a asset designed to only go up in value over time. Um, but one thing that happens a lot with Hex that a lot of Hexicans hate, but the Hexican whales love it, is there will be like a 1 week long stake for $1 million worth of Hex, $10 million worth of Hex, $5 million worth of Hex, whatever. And this stake just goes on for a week, and then the whale takes the interest earned, dumps it on the market, and they keep creating these short stakes, which don't really do a whole lot for the market. Like a promise to 7 days is almost a guarantee of dumping the earnings, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, can you do something like this with Genius? Well, I mean, this is what we've seen a lot with looking at the data, with the real world data of Hex, and it's something that many Hexicans are very aware of, especially if you follow the Hex whale Twitter, whichever that is. So with Genius, when you have an advanced stake, which is like super sexy, there's a period of time that in the beginning that you cannot. There's a 100-day period for all advanced stakes. There's a 120-day period where you cannot end your mining. You cannot end it. You can liquidate it, but you cannot end it. So any advanced stake you make, the first 120 days, you cannot end it. So somebody who's making these sweet, sweet gains, right? Like someone who has a few $1,000,000, um,
Right.
sure you can put that into Hex, you can put that in the Genius, but the Genius, um, the promise you make to Genius to get the sweet reward, the high risk, high reward scenario, you can't just make these short 7-day stakes and then dump on the market without there being a greater penalty. So
Right.
you have a 120-day minimum. So but you can do that with the simple stakes, and the simple stakes are only getting about a quarter of the whole reward pool. So yeah, so
That's fascinating. That seems. I mean, one can hope we'll see what ends up happening, but that seems like it would just totally eliminate that. I've been at X for about a year now. I've done a number of stakes, but I was unaware that that was a common pattern what else we're doing, and it was frustrating some people. That makes total sense that it would be frustrating, and that this is a pattern you see that Genius essentially solves, or it just isn't even an issue because of the math involved. We'll see, but
yeah, and there are different rules for those stakes. And it's all based on philosophy. Even with Hex, a lot of things are based on philosophy, and that's a good place to have your stuff based on. Um, and the philosophy here is that for high risk, high rewards, uh, your promise has to have some weight in it. It has to have time weight into it. Um, if not, then do the simple stakes. Simple stakes, when you're staking 20 days, for example, the first day and the last day, you cannot emergency end your stake. So while you have that protection, a small degree of needing to, what's the word? Still needing to plan, on still needing to plan on when you might have that emergency. So we talked about where whales for Hex are diluting and dumping on everybody in short 7-day stakes and even 30-day stakes, right? Um, talking about fees, in Genius, fees are distributed more to people instead of the origin address. Now, a lot of people just don't understand how awesome the Hex origin address is and how useful it is. Um, but unfortunately, the origin address in Hex holds back a lot of people from using Hex. I mean, I'm a big evangelist for Hex, and I'm surprised how many people just don't trust it because of the origin address. They don't trust the whole Satoshi idea that nobody knows who has the origin address. I mean, I trust that might be the case, but it freaks people out, and it also freaks people out that the origin address has half of everything. Now, yes, that's a good thing. The people who really understand Hex understand that if the origin address has half of the supply, then that actually puts more rewards into people's pockets over time. So because the origin address has half of the supply, uh, people are actually making more yield per year. Now that might not make sense, and I'm not going to spend the time here for it to make sense. But what I can say is you can still do that. You can still have people's APY go up without an origin address having half of the supply. And with Genius, that has happened. The fees that are distributed, they're distributed mostly to people. And but how the APY is made compounding over time and how the APY is still is good for the population is done differently than giving half of the supply to an origin address. It's done differently. Let's just put it that way. Some smart math tricks.
Gotcha. Okay.
So what you have is, worst case scenario, the hex origin address gets compromised. Worst case scenario, because I doubt a benevolent actor such as the origin address, I doubt the origin address is going to dump on everybody. That would be stupid. That's like in Bitcoin, saying that somebody's going to get all the mining power and then mine all the Bitcoin for themselves. It completely devalues the whole network. So for the origin address to do something malevolent, my words don't work.
Malevolent.
Whatever. Yeah. Maybe. My brain's kind of like not working anymore. But for the origin address to do something suicidal does not benefit the origin address and does not benefit people. However, um, the origin address, one point of failure. Um, if the keys for the origin address are compromised, probably won't be, but it's still possible. If the keys are compromised, then that can turn into quite a big problem for people, for hex holders. And I've kept that in mind, even though I understand the benefits of the OA. I've kept that in mind for myself personally with my with my future retirement, my current retirement, my future payments and payouts with hex.
Gotcha. Well, we're coming up on actually we surpassed about 90 minutes here. I do have a couple more questions if you still have time.
Cool. I'll hurry up.
Okay. And kind of transitioning, I think, from a little bit more technical to some topical stuff. So, how many total tokens will there be upon launch?
The Genius Smart contract will first airdrop 240 billion units to all of the people who have participated in the sacrifice.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And with the sacrifice having started, when do you expect to launch the final contract? It's usually
yeah. So when is
range,
when is the final contract expected to launch?
Yeah.
After the sacrifice. Sometime after the sacrifice phase ends, and before August. That's when I expect it. Will that happen? I really don't know. I don't have a crystal ball here. You see, with traditional software, you can release things and they can have problems. But when it comes to blockchain, you can't just release things that you can't just release things and update them and patch them. So there's a lot of extra steps you have to take. It's sort of like NASA launching a rocket into space. There's a lot to lose if it's not done right. So a lot of that due diligence is being done now, even during implementation of the smart contract, even during peer review, and talking with different companies to audit the smart contract for security, to audit the financials in the smart contract, or to audit the tokenomics of it, a financial audit, so to say. This is super important. Super important, right? That can delay development. That can delay development.
Okay. Gotcha. If you're comfortable, like it's my understanding you're going to try to do two kinds of audits. Is that correct? A security and a financial audit?
Correct.
Okay. And are you able to tell us who you're thinking, like who you're working with, or who you're thinking that is going to be providing these audits?
Yeah, I could. I'd just rather not. When the audits are done, when the audits are done, that'll be known. That'll be published.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not too familiar with the audit space, but it's basically like there's maybe half a dozen companies everybody uses, and one of those is who you're trying to work with.
Yeah. One of the popular ones.
Gotcha. Okay. Something came up on this call, and it reminded me the other day of, or whatever you want to call it, live stream, of the AMA you did with the Phoenix Group and the SWOT analysis, and how on the weakness part you mentioned the substrate. So you mentioned the fact that we talked about it. Ethereum's very expensive, gas is expensive. It really keeps your average Joe. If you a cup of coffee costs you $7 in gas. This makes no sense as an actual tool for your everyday person. Are there other weaknesses though that you see with this project other than the actual network it's based on or chain it's based on?
Yeah. Um, I on the other AMA I went with the substrate because that really is like the biggest weakness and something that you want to plan for. So
Mm-hmm.
with the problem with the substrate, there are inherent ways to work with stakes so they can be exodus, so they can you know go off to another chain, so to say, and that that will surely require some sort of oracle, and that's difficult because you're affecting the tokenomics of your existing system for a new system, right? And you shouldn't do that. If you do that on a system, it has to scale how the tokenomics were intended to work, anyways. Especially for people who are staking for 12 years. In Hex, you have people staking for 15.2 years, right? How can you plan that? But other inherent weaknesses are, I would say there aren't things that you can readily talk with your average person about. But it's good to be aware of your weaknesses. What I would like to say though is that the inherent weaknesses, potential weaknesses, are huge strengths today. They're huge strengths today, and they might be weaknesses in the future. It depends on a lot. Like today, um, with today you have the OA for Hex to some people being considered a weakness, and to other people being considered a strength. But really, it's an overall weakness if it prevents people from being onboarded. Um, and with Genius, um, with Genius, one big weakness is that there won't be a direct fiat on ramp in the beginning. And fiat on ramps are incredibly important for the ecosystem of any token, of any cryptocurrency. That's a problem that I personally intend to solve. Um, it's my intention at the moment. Um,
Very cool. The I is
I mean, I've
again
run I've
someone.
run Fina on ramps in the past. I've been the project director. I've I have a lot of experience in that space from like 2015, maybe late 2014, actually mid 2014, up until 2018, 2019. Um, so a fiat on ramp is super important. It's incredibly important. That doesn't exist at the time. That won't exist at
Yeah,
launch.
yeah. Having onboarded a bunch of people here recently as well into crypto at all levels, I will say it is the most frustrating thing that Coinbase is almost worse than they were in the beginning. They are worse, frankly. A number of these services are just absolutely um, nightmares to deal with for your average person. So that is an awesome thing to try to solve, and definitely a key weakness for any project. So what do you see as the future of Genius post launch? Once the contract launches, once this product launches, what do you see happening?
Well,
What do you hope happens?
I see I see it probably happening similar to Hex. I see a huge population of users using it for staking, and then finding what the earnings will be for simple stakes and advanced mining stakes. So I see people playing with it, not no, necessarily playing with it, but I see people experimenting with it, seeing how to use it, seeing what the earnings end up being, because after all, the earnings are going to depend on people's actions, anyways. And like in the beginning of Hex, people who used it didn't pay out too well. The APY, annual, the annualized yield didn't pay out too well. It was like everybody was staking, and then, well, this is a probably an oversimplification, but and then without it paying too well, some people dropped off, stopped staking. Um, I see that happening. I see the first time with Genius after launch it being a great time of learning and of seeing how things are working out as the tokenomics were expected to or designed to work out. Um, and I see people being very bullish of it. People are super excited about Genius. They understand what um, they understand the overall message. They might not understand the tokenomics in depth, but people are understanding it more and more every day. So I do see there being a lot of, I do see Genius being used for what it is intended to be used for since day one. And from there, some people deciding to provide liquidity instead, or people providing liquidity in the beginning. I see that being people who are very familiar with providing liquidity, period, and because yeah, there are potential benefits with that, huge benefits potential, um, and and based on based on the population now that is staking with Hex, let's say there's similar. Let's say Genius has a similar population. Um, people are gonna really like what Genius has to offer, but that has to be communicated. So I really don't have a whole lot of expectations on this. I just have um, a dream of it, and how not just myself have a dream of it, but the developers involved, the people who also worked on the tokenomics with me. We have a dream of what kind of game can be played, and it looks very positive. It looks super positive. I'm super bullish on it. I'm super excited about it. Over the last almost 12 years that I've been in the cryptocurrency space, um, there were coins that I had captured 100x return on, and even captured 1,000x, right? Bitcoin
Mm-hmm.
was one of them. Uh, Gridcoin, which was a small ecosystem, was another. Dash, Ethereum, Hex, Steam. These were all like high performers where I had gotten out at the time to get out of. Hex not being one of them, gotten out of. Hex definitely has a bright future. So, so having that experience and spending so much time looking at the tokenomics of so many different systems out there, and I've definitely missed a few. I've definitely haven't mentioned a few, just because they're not standing out at me right now. But, um, some of them had tokenomics issues that I could see weren't going to be sustainable in the future. And then others have been great. Bitcoin, great. Why don't like I don't use Bitcoin today. I haven't used Bitcoin in a long time. Why not? Because there's something better. There's something better and more sustainable. Better for me. Like Bitcoin, I personally don't feel that it's as exciting, and I don't feel there's much financial incentive in really being in it today. Maybe for other people. Same with Dash, right?
Right.
Did I answer your question? I kind of just kind of went like deer in headlights of like, oh, let me just channel this information and say that.
Yeah, I think you at first, and then you went in a slightly different direction, but it underscores. I feel like one of your greatest strengths I mean, like having worked a little bit more closer with you side by side on this community. It's like I'm continually impressed by just the thought you put into things, the way you word things, and understanding why, et cetera, et cetera.
Well,
Like,
thank
just
you. I
you're a great
appreciate that.
businessman, basically. But one thing I've seen throughout the years is that you're fantastic at spotting winners in crypto. I feel like you basically said, "I'll develop a winner," um, and something I want to put my own money into, and help others out with. But one thing in the beginning that you kind of
You got a
started
good point
talking
there
about
too.
with liquidity providers, and pretty much this is my last question, and then I've got a couple questions from the Florida Taxman. But I was curious if you thought about any ideas, like post launch. You've seen this in, I hate to say it again, but in the X community in particular, which is awesome and totally amazing what the community itself has built. Like even the other day, the Maximus DAO launched. Fantastic idea. Um, the great tool, doing tons of activity. Do you see anything needed or coming out of the community for Genius in the future?
So in the future of Genius, like, do I see things like Hedron popping up as a version for
Precisely.
Genius? Do I see
Exactly.
Maximus popping up for something like Genius? I definitely do. I absolutely do. Uh, like, I don't see all of Hedron's functionality being useful for Genius.
Right,
Genius started as a way of being number go up and having a lot of similarities with Hedron, a ton of similarities, and a lot of those similarities were abandoned because they just don't help people out that much. But I can absolutely see there is a market for there being a Hedron for Genius. There is going to be a market for a Maximus for Genius. So smart contract developers out there, pay attention to this. This is something that you can build on top of Genius's protocol. Yeah. Can I add a little side note there too? A little
yeah,
side
of
note.
course.
You mentioned myself putting my own money into this. I've had I've been doing my own personal sacrifice with paying the development team and paying the researchers and developers on this, which only about half of them have worked on it out of love. Uh, None of us have received founder coins. You hear about a rug pull happening from founders rug pulling. I have, and then I sent that back to basically to be burned, back to the treasury, back to be burned, and I did that so that one, people couldn't talk about rug pull. Before it's like, well, people should have skin in the game, right? People should have some tokens for something, but not so much in the decentralized world. I believe in Genius so much that I am taking part in the sacrifice. I am liquidating different means of assets that I don't think are valuable, and and I am going to be putting that into Genius as well. I believe in it more than 100%. Uh, yeah, else I wouldn't be working on this. I wouldn't be putting my passion and desire into it. And I'm having a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying it. Um, yeah, I believe it's uh, put a lot of math has been done to have Genius um, really express what myself and other people see as a possibility for assets of the future. And I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited about it. And um, yeah, I there's a lot of attack on things like this. And when I say attack, I mean like the state, regulators, even attack on people who do have money in general. Like people will mug people, people will whatever. But I believe in this a ton, and I'm putting a lot more than my own work into this, putting my finances into it. I want Genius to be um, the main factor in managing my retirement and managing goals and things that I'm saving for. I want Genius to do that. It will.
That's fantastic. And as a personal aside, I didn't tell you, but when the sacrifice started the other morning, or yes, yesterday morning,
Yeah,
a
yesterday
week and a
morning.
half ago, it feels like it. I think I literally got like 3 hours of sleep, or maybe 4 hours last 2 days. Um, the I was just really excited, and I've been holding on to a lot of mana for some time. It's like, screw this. This ain't going anywhere. So yeah, liquidated about a good amount, let's say. And yeah, I'm definitely all in and totally, you know, I love everybody we've been working with in the community and stuff. It's been a dream come true, frankly. Like I told you on the one voicemail a while back, but um, awesome. So a couple more questions just from this Florida taxman that's been in the group. Does the airdrop happen the same day as the go live date? What do you anticipate that day looking like? I think we covered the day. We're not sure when that's going to happen, but airdrop wise, do you think it'll happen before or that same day? Like people be able to check their address kind of like they've done with Pulse, something like that.
Well, so when Genius is launched, the that's when the airdrop will happen. That's when people will
Okay.
see in their MetaMask, they'll see their airdrop of their Genius. So sacrifice today for that. Um, when you're talking about your mana, my guess is, you took your decentralized mana and you bought Genius with it, or the Legacy Genius token. which is like what, $1.10 maybe right now, or I guess it could have changed in the last hour. Um, but although it may be $1.10, when you sacrifice it, you're given $3.33 worth of sacrifice points, which means, hey, if Legacy Genius is less than $3.33 and you're gonna sacrifice, and you have the gas fees to cover this, buy Legacy Genius, sacrifice that. If the price of Legacy Genius is more than $3.33, if it's $4, you're incentivized to sell your Legacy Genius and sacrifice the Ethereum or US dollar or whatever for that. So it's an interesting mechanic. No sacrifices have had this. I know that's not the like focus here, but you mentioned the position you had. You mentioned what you did, and people who are thinking about sacrificing for Genius's cause for financial freedom and transactional freedom, I urge you to check out the mechanic where you are sacrificing Legacy Genius, Legacy GENI. Check that out. Check that out. And as Benjamin Lepik says here, the placeholder contract had the word Genitrust in it, which is a previous company that I've worked with for a long time. And it was a savings company as well. So that's like a little Easter egg mistake. You might see the word Genitrust on there. Legacy GENI. Check out the comment. Check out the space below on the YouTube video to get more information on where to get Legacy GENI. You might see it says the word Genitrust, and it's the same thing. Yeah.
Thank you for clearing that up. Two last questions. Is there any software that a user will need in order to stake, or will they need Ether in their account?
Is there any software that does what?
So once the contract launches, once the tokens are dispersed, in order, day one, people want to stake. Is there any additional software they need, or will they need Ether in their account?
Okay, well, for the Ethereum chain, they'll need Ether so that they can do some smart contract functions. On Pulse chain, they'll need Pulse. And the software they'll use to stake, that will be deployed on GENI.app, GENI.app. And whatever websites also deploy this software, there will be software that people can use to do this. And GENI.app will have the first piece of software to do that, unless somebody from the community beats the development team to their own thing. So get into Telegram, get into the Genius Crypto Telegram channel, t.me/GENI crypto, GENI crypto, and subscribe to the newswire on Telegram. That's t.me/geniuswire. And I know on Telegram, when we're on Telegram, so many chat rooms on Telegram, they constantly have notifications. So on Telegram, it can be pretty loud and inundating. But you can silence these chat rooms if they're too loud for you. But don't silence the Genius Wire chat room. That will give you the information you want about Genius that happens, and what app to use to mine for Genius.
It seems like every time I start prepping the next question, you start to begin to cover it. You start talking about the community there. My final question is, if you could ask anything from the community, either for something, to consider something, anybody watching today, what would it be?
Well, I would like to encourage not just the community, but people who aren't into cryptocurrency yet. I'd like to encourage them to check it out. And Genius can be a great way for people to learn what some of the possibilities are of this whole blockchain world, this whole cryptocurrency world. I'd like to encourage people to do that. It might seem scary, and it might seem like, oh, I don't know how to do this. A lot of adults will say, I've heard a lot of adults say, oh, Robert, I need help. Help me do this. And I tell them, which I'd like to encourage the community or anybody listening who does not have cryptocurrency, download MetaMask wallet, MetaMask, MetaMask. Download that, check that out. Um, you can read things all day long. You can read white papers. You can read from people how to do stuff. But, it might be a pain in the butt to learn just by experiencing, but do that. I want to urge people to experience, um, to I forget what the word is, where you experience experiment, to experiment with these things. You've got a ton to learn, a ton of really, really cool things. And as you can see, this technology is not going away. You'll learn about it. It will help you. People who were shut out about learning about computers did not want to learn about computers forever. And even when smartphones came out, like the iPhone, where there were no buttons, people still didn't want to use computers. They didn't want to use the iPhone. You had Steve Ballmer from Microsoft laughing, going, "Where's the buttons? It's got no buttons, stupid." Like, people think Steve Jobs is smart. He's not smart. He's dumb. But of course he wasn't. But what do you have now? Remember, like when you were younger, like your parents or old people, quote quote, they never used computers. It was too difficult. Well, look at them today. Everybody's using a computer. They're using their smartphone. They're using their Android. They're using their iPhones. I was at a cafe earlier, and this dude, like, it was a beautiful sight. This guy had to have been 80, but he's sitting there using his phone and writing, and it looked like he was doing some calculations. But he's
Yeah.
using his phone like fluently, right? So
Yeah.
that's because smartphones were just so useful that all of humanity uses them now. Just like the internet was so useful that maybe not all of humanity, but a significant portion of humanity. This is the same thing for cryptocurrencies. This is the same thing for the Genius Smart Financial Contract. It's the same thing for US dollar coin, um, USD Tether. It's the same thing for these. They're incredibly useful. So use it. It may be scary, but it's all right. It's not going to kill you. If you lose $50, that's like $50 of education. Yeah, right? Like, if you buy a $50 jeans, you're never getting that $50 back. You're probably not going to sell your jeans for $50. So look at that with cryptocurrency. If you put in $50, so what? You're going to learn. You're going to explore these benefits. You're going to learn something. And it's potentially something that can become extremely useful for your life and extremely useful for even for your savings. Extremely useful for your financial freedom. Extremely useful for not, waiting on the phone for hours just to talk with your bank that doesn't want to talk to you anyways. And so you get all these electronic things. Or you go down to the bank. All right, well, yeah, this is something useful where you don't have to drive to the bank for the constant problems you're having with the bank. Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I was
encourage people,
helping
do this.
somebody.
Check it out. People, once
Yeah.
again, check out crypto. Do it. Whatever you put into it, money wise, will be well worth the education. And if it's not worth the education, whatever. Like, you're gonna learn something, and chances are it's gonna be really good.
Absolutely. It's almost magical once you start playing with it and you realize MetaMask is like your bank account. DeFi is your E-Trade, or even Forex. It's unparalleled. It's almost too. It's almost you go through so much pain to open a bank account or to access your own money in the day-to-day world. To experience this is unbelievable. It's like, no, there's no way that this is the way it could be.
Yeah.
So,
If you can use your smartphone, you can use cryptocurrency. Um, for anybody listening to this
that's good.
who's not into cryptocurrency yet, um, it's a lot of people think they can't do it. But if you can use a smartphone and you can learn a new app on your smartphone, like Facebook or whatever popular app, then you absolutely can learn how to use MetaMask, and you can learn how to use cryptocurrency. And you will. You will. You will. There's more and more people today that will help. And the Telegram chat community, whatever it is, download the Telegram app if you haven't used it before. Get away from WhatsApp. Get away from WhatsApp. WhatsApp's Facebook trash of spying on you, and Telegram is company in Dubai that doesn't give a crap about Americans. So probably cares about people in Dubai's privacy or lack of privacy. I don't know, but download these new apps. Use them. Get to use them. It's you get to play with your phone. while you use them. Give it a try.
Fantastic. Well, that's all I have for questions. I really appreciate. We're literally just about exactly 2 hours. Is there anything else that you wanted to say or mention?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd like to spend about a half hour talking about the burnamentals and how traders benefit. No, I'm kidding. Um, I am gonna get back to some things with the tokenomics. It's documenting them properly. Right now, Genius is in implementation. The smart contracts being implemented, and the geniuses who did the tokenomics, two of them being well-known hexagons that don't even know of each other working on the Genius tokenomics. I'm a known hexagon. I started the Hexflex tag hashtag on Twitter, but I'm also not afraid to say like, hey, yeah, something can be better than hex in some ways. The people working on these tokenomics, they're not also the people doing the smart contract. The smart contract people that is their expertise, the smart contracts, and um, smart contract magic, because it's a totally different type of development. And yeah, I'm spending a lot of my time making sure that that communication is proper. And anybody who's watched the rest of this, hey, if you can say abracadabra as a comment, I like to say that with abracadabra. I'll know that you watched this whole thing, and that'd be cool. That'd be cool. Maybe give you a little Genius airdrop. Um, I don't know how that'll work, but come into the room and go sacrifice. Go to sacrifice.to. Look at the links at the bottom of this video description. Check those out. Come join the community. Come say hello, or or don't say hello. Say screw you. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe, or don't unsubscribe and give it a negative, whatever. Like just it'll be great. This is still super early with Genius, and I'd love to say hello to everyone too. Thank you, Digital.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time. Yeah, I think this was an excellent overview, and we'll have to do more. I see some other examples of these, like ideas for these.
Sweet. All right, have a good
All
one.
right, man. You too.
Bye bye. Whew. Okay. See, Cash App is telling me that Bitcoin is down 5%. All right. Up. Some people are telling me abracadabra already. Thank you, Janik. Thank you for the well done. So what should I do here? Should I just like... I'm going to hit stop streaming, end broadcast, but... like, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how much of the end of a broadcast gets cut off when I hit the end broadcast button. I don't want everything to get cut off. So let me try this. I'm going to count to 20. And when I hit to 10, I'm going to hit this stop streaming button or this end broadcast button. All right. And I'm also going to say hello to Adam Schiffman. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,